Okay, so it is time for another blog post. And in this blog post, I'm going to be talking about the argument about indica versus sativa. Does it really matter? And how does a plant being indica sativa affect consumers when they do consume the plant? So I'm going to actually read this blog in its entirety. I'm going to be reading off my monitor, so it's going to look kind of weird. I'm going to be looking up, but I'm going to go for it. So the blog post is entitled Indica versus Sativa, Does It Really Matter? The Great Divide. This is a topic that has gained some attention, especially in the past few years. This is a very polarizing topic somehow, as are many things in the cannabis space. And to be perfectly honest, there are probably very few people that have an opinion on this subject that have any merit. And the reason that I say that is because so many topics in the cannabis industry are dominated by misinformation, if not disinformation. This false information is perpetuated from one pothead to the next without fact checking. While I believe this type of perpetuation of false information runs rampant everywhere, particularly because of the internet, it's particularly bad in the cannabis space. I think there's something inherent to our culture of the cannabis industry that perpetuates this. There's a lot of know-it-alls in this industry. So how do we know if a strain being indica, sativa, or hybrid really affects consumers' experience? Well, there is a science to it. Firstly, this has to be a controlled experiment, meaning you have one variable that is constant, like one particular strain consumed by multiple different people. I was a medical cannabis caregiver in Denver for 5 years, and the way different patients receive the same strain differently was quite surprising and honestly pretty astounding. So the first thing I would tell patients would be not to do any research on a strain that I was supplying to them beforehand and before consuming it, because confirmation bias and anchoring your mental state will have a significant impact on your perception of your experience with the strain. This is largely just placebo effect. So there are really two schools on this subject. The first is indica strains are more for relaxing and are associated with body buzz, and sativa strains are better for production, more energetic highs, more task-oriented buzz, etc., and so forth. The second school is that it doesn't matter because indica and sativa are a classification of the plant's landrace and ancestors and have no bearing on your mental or physical state. And my opinion is actually I believe the answer is none of the above. At least neither one of those two schools fully illustrates my position on the subject after treating many patients as a caregiver. So this is my conclusion on the indica versus sativa debate. First, it's worth mentioning that there are two elements that are more important in how consumers medicate with cannabis than whether or not it's indica or sativa, in my opinion. The first is an individual's personal physiology. We all have a unique endocannabinoid system, and we all receive cannabis in a unique fashion. What might seem like more of an indica to one person might seem like more of a sativa buzz to another person. It's like having a unique tongue. Just because I hate broccoli doesn't mean that you're going to hate broccoli. Second, and in my opinion, the most dominating factor in how you receive a strain is actually your current state of mind. Something I've never heard or read about outside of my own personal experience and the experiences of my patients. For instance, if I'm really stressed, I don't want a strain that makes me feel a quote unquote sativa high because I know I'm going to drive myself crazy obsessing over whatever it is I'm stressed about. I might smoke a CBD strain if I was stressed. That has no cerebral effect. So let's get back to the plant though. So I do believe it matters whether it's indica or sativa, sort of. So yes, indica and sativa are a designation of taxonomy, but that doesn't mean it doesn't affect consumers' experiences. So on average, yes, an indica is more likely to be a more relaxing body buzz, not because it's an indica per se, but because it's oftentimes, and not always, but oftentimes, indica strains contain terpenes and phytocannabinoids that are chemically proven to have a calming effect, like mercerine, CBD, and CBG. Similarly, a lot of sativa strains come from equatorial regions that may contain large amounts of alpha-pinene, alpha-limonene, and higher levels of THC, thus often causing a more upbeat and mental high. So, in conclusion, it's not an exact science, and oftentimes an indica does contain chemical compounds that are more often associated with sativa and vice versa. And then, obviously, there are the other two factors discussed, personal physiology and current state of mind. And again, this current state of mind can be dictated by preconceived notions about whether a person likes, quote unquote, an indica or sativa strains. So how do you know what strains are right for you? Well, it's simple. Try different strains with an open mind and stick with the ones that you like. Oftentimes, if you like the smell of a strain, there is a good chance you will like that high as well. People oftentimes say the nose knows. This directly pertains to the personal physiology and the olfactory system of a person. Chemical alterations of plants, like GMOs and PGRs, are not to go unmentioned because those things, along with toxic pesticides, can have a significant impact on how consumers receive a strain. You may have smoked what would have been your favorite strain of all time, but due to the plant being grown at a dirty facility that employs toxic practices, you may not have had a great experience with the strain, which is why everyone should grow their own. Thanks for listening if you've gotten this far.